Hi, everyone. We're going to give folks just another minute to get all logged in. The numbers are going up rapidly as people click the Join Now button. So if you'll bear with us just a moment, we're going to pause till everyone gets logged into the system, and then we can start our webinar. I appreciate you all being on. Okay, it looks like the numbers have all preloaded that we're going to join. Again, this is Bobby Harris of the Utility Broadband Alliance, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar. For any of you on the call who are not currently members of UVBA, please go visit UVBA.com, check us out, and if you have any questions, just shoot us a note there on the website, and we'll be happy to have a chat with you about UVBA and all the fabulous things that are going on here with our members. This is just one of those items that we get to talk about and share as members, and we're happy that all of you are able to join us today. If you're also, we're going to save some time at the end after the panel to do questions from the audience. On your tool there is a questions dialog box. Please use that to type in your questions. We will do our very best to get to as many questions as possible, but realize if we don't get to all of your questions, we'll follow up with you directly after the broadcast. Sometimes we answer the question in the course of the broadcast, so you may want to wait till close to the 40 or 45-minute mark before typing in your questions, but feel free to do so as it pops into your head. So, with all of that housekeeping now out of the way, it is my distinct pleasure to turn the mic over to our host, Mike Brozek from Anterix. He's also been in the utility industry for, gosh, probably 3 decades. I won't make him any older than that. But, Mike, it's my pleasure to turn it over to you, sir. You have the floor.
All right. Thank you, Bobby. And I want to welcome everybody to the next edition of this UBBA webinar. We've got a great panel today. We've got a really exciting and interesting topic to discuss, and I think this is going to be really good use of your time. I just want to take a brief moment and mention this organization has been set up, the Utility Broadband Alliance, UBBA. This is really a fantastic organization. You know, utilities, and Bobby's right, I spent 30 years in the utility, most of that time responsible for telecom. Utilities for a very long time have seen the need of controlling and owning the communications path that drive their critical systems, things like SCADA, things like distance relay protection, and other types of use cases. And really, as what we're seeing here, and that's what this association is, is designed for, is for utilities and vendors to come together in a very safe and open environment so that they can discuss the use of private broadband networks and really take that next logical step. As so much, so part of the decarbonization of this industry, we have so many more devices out on the lines, and you're just not going to be able to run fiber to all those. Wireless is going to be the answer, and when you own that wireless network, there's really a lot of power and resiliency and cybersecurity can be built in. So with that, I just want to encourage anyone who is not part of this organization, UBBA, please, as Bobby said, go to the website and check it out. It's really fantastic. Okay, well, let's get on to the topic of today, and that is the cost of doing nothing, which is a really a great title. I think it could also be stated as the cost of not doing anything new. We've got a great panel. I am going to go through and ask each of the panelists to introduce themselves, but we've got a really nice mix of vendor and utility in this panel, just like UBBA. It's a great mix. So let's start out with Steve Lowe. Steve, if you could introduce yourself.
Hey, good afternoon, good morning. Steve Lowe here with Ericsson. So I've been involved in the utility industry for, like Mike, over 30 years, either working for a utility or providing communication solutions to them. Been involved in helping utilities evaluate PLTE, private LTE networks since about 2015. Excited to continue to be a part of that evaluation, deployment, and execution. So excited to have this conversation with you guys today.
Great. Jatinder?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm excited to be part of this webinar with you, Mike, and my friends from Ericsson, NYPA, and Alpha Wireless, focused on discussing the cost of doing nothing. Special thanks to Antrix and UBBA for this opportunity. A bit about myself. Again, I'm Jitendra Vora. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Telit. So I've been in the wireless space for about 25 or so years. Previously, I worked at Motorola, followed by Panasonic, and now I've been with Telit for about 3 years. Most of my experience has been on the infrastructure side of the business, selling solutions to critical infrastructure projects geared towards public safety, private LTE. And now for the past few years, I've been on the device and module side. It's very cool to see the entire solution coming together. I truly care about this topic we're talking about today, as this directly impacts our country's critical infrastructure. So I look forward to this discussion. Mike, back to you.
All right, and Tim?
Hey, thanks, Mike. Yeah, greatly appreciate this opportunity to be able to join the UVBA's session here and talk about technology and how technology can help the utilities. This is an area that's kind of near and dear to my heart on how utilities can change the way they do business. And Alpha Wireless is really poised to really help them do that and creating solutions that meet their needs and give them the capabilities to go out and solve problems in their network. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tim. And Jerry?
Yeah, I'm Jerry Gentry. I'm with New York Power Authority. We're kind of a crossbreed between an enterprise and a government agency, and you can hear a phone I forgot to turn off ringing in the background. I apologize. I'll go grab that when I'm done here. I've been involved in IT and technology for my entire career and in various different organizations. I've been part of New York Power Authority for the last, it'll be 4 years in October. And I've been involved day one in looking at our network infrastructure, which has some fiber going in and also which is already completed. We're expanding all the time, and private LTE as a method of enhancing our business capabilities and enhancing our safety for our field workers, as well as looking at how we're a generation and transmission company, so a little different than distribution, but we've got large areas within upstate New York that don't have a lot of coverage from any kind of a cell provider, where we still have to dispatch field people to, and we have IoT sensors that are being deployed because we get a lot of ice too. So there's a lot of utilization for a private LTE kind of environment, and that's what we're having the discussion with internally right now is, what is the cost of doing nothing?
That's great. With those introductions, thanks everybody. Let's just jump right into it. And Jerry, before you can get the chance to get to that phone, I want to pose the first question to you. As the utility member here on the board, we talk about the inherent risk of doing nothing, which I think also could be phrased as not doing anything new or making changes. Do you think the writing's on the wall that action is required now, or do you think that doing nothing or not making changes can work for the next 5 to 10 years there at your utility?
From a New York Power Authority perspective, I think that we have to do something within the next 5 years. We've already started. We completed in December some testing. We did some field testing from September to December of last year after we had some relief on the COVID environment for a couple of short spans of wireless. We used was it a cow cellular on wheels capability from one of our vendors and brought in the head end equipment and all the other stuff. And the test was successful. Right now, we went through a budget discussion around what's the right way to go. Should we get our own frequency, our own spectrum, and manage that ourselves? Do we really want to become a telephone company? Or should we go to a third party who does that for a living, who has spectrum that we can get from them as part of an overall agreement? And I got to play the devil's advocate on that one, asking all the questions because I run architecture at New York Power Authority. So I got to poke holes in everybody's arguments about one way or the other. And I think we're going to be moving forward with looking for a third-party provider to partner with on this, actually potentially multiple third-party providers. And part of that is because of, as I mentioned, in upstate New York, we just have a lot of spans that are very distant and that we need to be able to track, especially during the winter months and when there's storms. We can't dispatch people across the entire span. So having IoT sensors there and then being able to have those connected back to us is critical for us. But some of those smaller easements in our rights of way go through areas where there are no carriers who really provide high-level service for us. So that's the part of that we're in a negotiation with right now. And what's the right frequency? What's the right design? As we move forward to partnering with the municipalities in New York on smart lights and on DER type of technologies, where we're going to get VPPs and be the aggregator for those VPPs. There are just more and more opportunities for how do we provide the connectivity for these remote areas and for these odd IoT type of places of infrastructure keep coming up, and a wireless capability seems to be the best way to do that and the most economical. Now we just have to get the media.
Yeah, it's great. Well, Jerry, we're hearing you loud and clear. The time to act is now, and you hit one on the key, benefits of a private network, and that is coverage. And you get to build the system where you want it. Jatinder, I want to pose the same question to you there at Telit. Is doing nothing an option?
Yeah, my opinion, I believe the writing is on the wall, and it's in bold letters. In fact, the letters to me say, make the decision to start the planning process now. You may be able to postpone the actual bringing up the network 1 to 2 years from now, but not, in my opinion, not 5 to 10 years from now. Bottom line is there's 3 important takeaways. One, it needs to be done for sure. And you're doing it with cellular technology that's a very proven, with over 3 billion users using that technology. So it's also a good fit for the utilities with very low risk. Keep in mind, it's not just migrating to the new technology, but also changing the processes, the standard operating procedures, training the people. As you can imagine, all that's going to take time to roll out the network and implement best practices. So I would say start now by kicking off the process. I also wanted to touch upon the cost and highlight why paying upfront might be a better option than on the back end. We're seeing more and more natural disasters, hurricanes, fires, et cetera, happening with huge economic impact. And the dollar amount just keeps on increasing, even though the same type of storm is passing, but based upon all the costs going up. So yes, it's going to be very expensive upfront by starting to pay now, but it will be significantly more expensive down the line. We will not be able to avoid the natural disasters or losing power to millions of people, but we can avoid all the collateral damage, the loss of lives and possible fines from FCC, et cetera. I just wanted to highlight one last thing. I have a document in front of me, some research that was done that documented the cost if you don't do anything. Now, this document, which is by CBO in front of me, dated March 2020, basically it states if a disaster causes widespread, long-lasting damage to an electric grid or cyber attack, it could cost about $160 million, which equates to about 1 to 2% of the GDP that's lost for a single event. So again, this is according to CBO, which is the Congress of the United States Congressional Budget Office. So I just wanted to kind of say, hey, the cost is also something people should consider and start now. The process is going to take time.
Great, thanks, Jatinder, and I appreciate being able to really put dollars and cents to that, that there is truly a cost of doing nothing. Steve, let's go to you and see what your thoughts are on this same question to you.
So definitely Jerry and Jatinder hit some great topics here, and just to tag on to those is around last Friday there was an article in the Wall Street Journal that was released. It was titled "America's Power Grid is Increasingly Unreliable," and in that document it kind of supports Jatinder's thought process about in the 10-year period before year 2000 there were 24 major power outages, but in the 10 years prior to 2020 there were over 180. So we see that these increased outages are continuing to grow. And so with that, we know that we've got to put some type of technologies in place that will be able to support the solutions that are needed to recover from those outages. And then the other point I wanted to make was that, so basically the doing nothing is not going to be an option. But there was another article that came out that I read at a very high level. It's called "Investor-Owned Utilities Underestimate Potential Cost of Carbon Climate Change," from a Deloitte article. And so the potential cost to utilities could escalate if action is delayed, the Deloitte analyst estimated. So not only are these outages going to impact their capabilities to reduce cost, but the move to net zero carbon footprint is another driver that's going to be really pushing them to deploy some technologies. Now we know that utilities are going to do something. And, I think what we need to really think about is that historically in the past, utilities have built purpose-built networks to address one application or one need that they have on their infrastructure. And we think that utilities have learned from that experience that doesn't make the best economical sense. So while cost of doing nothing, cost of doing something just to handle a Band-Aid approach might be as bad too. So I think that they need to look at putting together a solution that helps to apply to the applications today, but can provide them some view into the future for future applications.
Okay, that's fascinating. I, again, appreciate you bringing some dollars and cents to the conversation. Tim, I'm going to change the question up. I think we've pretty well answered that first one, that the time is now. But let's talk about what the drivers are. And with your work with utilities, and what are you seeing? Are things like regulatory compliance, cybersecurity, aging workforce, natural disasters, as Steve and Jachinder? What's really driving the utilities to want to upgrade their systems, specifically wireless systems?
Yeah, I think there's a number of key drivers that are really kind of underlying, motivate them to do these things. When you have these aging communication systems in place, I spent 16.5 years at one of the tier 1 operators, and my focus was on technology advancements, and why do you want to do those? And when you start layering on different type of applications over time, that becomes a lot more complicated. It becomes more costly. And then you have, end of life issues to deal with. And then on top of that, you have security. Security advances come fast now. So what we're seeing is that, that those drivers of some of the aging systems, the aging workforce, are definitely underlying factors in that. And then you have, just technology drivers in general that are just changing the whole landscape for the utilities too. With all of the driving regulatory stuff behind going to EVs and other type of electric grid systems, solar panels distributed throughout, everybody's houses now. There's a real need to really understand what's going on with all those elements as near real time as possible. A lot of the aging systems just don't have the capabilities to be able to manage that and cost effectively grow. So when you start layering all those items on top of that, you really have to start finding those elements to take and change and go in and press in technology to that. One of the beauties of using private LTEs for the utilities is that the technology curve on LTE has really driven the cost structures down to where it's much more affordable. You're approaching 5G, where you have near real-time type of capabilities, which is really what is needed in a lot of different applications for utilities. So, back to your question earlier, when is it? It needs to happen soon to try to get in front of that, get their workforces in place, get the networks in place to allow them to be able to take advantage of this technology to help them manage this growth cycle.
That's great. Yes, thanks, Tim. Jerry, I want to go back to you and Al and there at NIPA, and we've talked about the time to changes now and some of the drivers that are in there. Again, I was in utility a long time, and there's a very good reason to not do anything new. Electric utilities are providing an absolutely critical resource that drives every single part of our society, and so you just don't want to mess that up. So a lot of times a change would come as a reactive response, as opposed to being a preactive or preventive type move. Are you seeing things there at NIPA where you're seeing more of utilities trying to be prepared for the future, more so than react to current events?
It's a groundswell that's moving in the right direction, I would say. As an IT person, I'm always anxious to implement not necessarily the latest IT, but to always investigate and stay close to the edge when there's a good business value for putting something in. So I think the leaders within NIPA are very aware of potential business value by doing private LTE, and both in terms of their flexibility. So as we move to more of a dynamic a DER kind of an environment, we need that flexibility to be able to move connections from point A to point B, as opposed to stringing wire or negotiating for wire from a local carrier. There's also security issues. Everyone is much more aware of security, and the idea of having a private component of our network that complements our private wire fiber environment is a very that's a positive thing. And I think, yeah, I'm seeing within the utility operations groups that I work closely with, they're doing a lot of things with AI and machine learning, and a lot of the tools that they're looking, a lot of the advances they're looking to do, even in some of our older plants, trying to increase automation, increase the digitization of those older plants. This plays into that very well to allow them to do, expanding IoT devices to parts of the plant and the dams and under the hydro electric that we do, where normal cabling can't be done. And so it gives us a degree of flexibility we didn't have before. And so I'm getting a lot of, in many ways, getting a lot of positive response to that.
Great, thank you, Jerry. Steve, I want to turn to you. There at Ericsson, you guys have a long history of working with both carriers and private operators, such as Southern Linked and Southern Company. And we're talking about, okay, there is a cost of doing nothing, so we've got to do something. Let's talk a little bit about what those drivers are, and maybe more along the lines of, is it technology? Is it people? Is it regulatory pressures? What are you seeing as you work with these utilities? What's driving the change?
Well, in the roles I've had over the many years, I've had the ability to sit down with many senior leaders within primarily investor-owned utilities. And during those conversations, I usually go through the list of impacts to communications decisions. And you've gone through many of those with the aging workforce. That move from analog to digital signal was a big driver at one time. And so I go around and talk about that, cybersecurity, NERC-CIP. And then I always like to point out the one thing that is the most impactful to decisions on communications is the risk of the wrong choice. And I think Jerry touched on that, is that, most investor-owned utilities or utilities in general, they want to be a fast second and not the first. And so I think, and you talked about it too, Mike, is that when you think about a utility, they are one of the most critical infrastructure providers that we have in our country. And so when they make a decision, we're all dependent upon that decision. Their success is our success. They really take that responsibility at heart. They live it, they breathe it. You and I both worked at a utility. We take that very seriously as a utility employee, that we're providing a life critical service to our customers. But I think that in my time away from the utility, things have changed. When I was at a utility, primarily the customer expected when they got home, their light came on and they were able to cook dinner. Now, Mike, things have changed quite a bit with what customer expectations are. So I think that's going to drive the requirements for change. But when ultimately it comes down to, these senior leaders still have to have a profitable company. And so they've got to do it in a manner that they can provide an extremely resilient, reliable network infrastructure, but do it in a way that they are profitable. Now, the big change I am seeing, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit right now, is, but as I said, I started talking to utilities about private networking in 2015, private LTE networking. At that time, there was gaps in the solution. Today, we've come together at the confluence of the requirements, the needs, and the technology all being available. First time ever, they've had access to both the technology that are able to combine multiple different use cases. You no longer need the 20 different networks to support 20 different use cases. They have that technology, and that's fundamentally based on LTE technology, which, as you mentioned, Ericsson is a leader in 3GPP standards and a leader in being able to deploy those at a utility. And now you have availability to spectrum. So I think that that's what's going to really drive some of the change, is that always in the past there was a gap in the solution. Now, more than ever, there's a complete solution available. Hopefully that tried to answer some of your questions there, Mike.
You did, Steve, very completely. In fact, it really is a great segue. I'm going to turn it over to Jatinder and talk about Intellit. And tell us about some of the products now that you are, as you're selling into these private networks, and how these might be different from when you were selling specifically to carriers or others.
Yeah, right now we've been in the utility space for many years, since 2015. So we really understand the space. But now we've been aggressively, in the front ends, getting our products ready for example, the 900 megahertz Antrix band, CBRS. So we're positioned. We have like over 10 modules that's already FCC certified on Cat M, NB, Cat 1, Cat 4. We're already looking at use cases to go beyond that. So we're talking to utilities. So right now we're planning for later in 2022 and beyond.
That's great. Tim, same question for you. What are the products over at Alpha Wireless there that you're seeing are getting a lot of traction?
Yeah, one of the key things is like Alpha Wireless is like a global leader in 3.5 gigahertz antennas. And so we really have a huge portfolio of solutions that play very nicely into the CBRS band. Being a technology leader for Alpha Wireless in North America, and one of the things I was keeping an eye on is like when you're looking at wireless networks, you always try and balance coverage capacity. So I was very much keeping my pulse on what Anterix is doing and how that spectrum is going to be used. When we saw it was getting kind of positioned more towards going into coverage for utilities and those type of applications, it really made a nice segue for us on our product line to integrate both the 900 megahertz and the 3.5 gigahertz together in a single product. So we were actually the first antenna vendor to present those type of solutions, to put them in place to be able to do the coverage from 900 and capacity from the 3.5 gigahertz. And what's really interesting too is as we were working in this segment, learning more, working with Ericsson on some different projects. One of the key things that we found that really was a changer for us that we weren't really anticipating was, from a regulation standpoint, like in the state of Tennessee, they enabled the utilities to be able to become a broadband provider. So once that type of regulation was inset, then it allowed utility companies to be able to start deploying their own telecom networks, not only for their own use, but they also could offer it to their customer base as well. So we had the pleasure of working with Newport Utilities and deploying one of the first CBRS networks. They were on the very leading edge. We provided them antenna solutions. Then when we developed our combined 800, 900, we were actually able to work very closely with one of the big utilities in Southern California that's now deploying that type of product in their networks. So it's really about trying to meet that technology need for whatever, if it's regulatory or if it's really, a need for changing their architecture. I think it was mentioned earlier, how do you simplify it? Well, you bring all those technologies into a single layer, and it really minimizes the amount of complexity. You don't have to have 5 or 6, 7 different networks running simultaneously. So it really helps solve that issue, drives their costs down, and now it expands it out to offer up IoT type of things for Intellit. Tellit's working on some stuff with another client we're working with. It's very exciting for us. I know it's going to be exciting for Tellit when that thing launches on how to drive costs out of deployment. And that's one of the biggest costs with the network is putting point solutions out there to monitor. And there are now innovations coming there that will allow them to go out and put these things in a matter of 8-10 minutes versus 2 or 3 hours. So a lot of fun, exciting type of stuff going on to help solve these type of things for the utility space.
That's great. Thanks, Tim. Okay, let's change the conversation a little bit. And Jerry, I'm gonna come to you with this one. I view this as a journey. The journey from inaction or status quo to the deployment of a private wireless network, like we've talked about. You've taken many steps along that journey, but let's put ourselves in the shoes of one of the attendees on the webinar today, or maybe somebody that'll be watching this after, and they say, okay, I get the technology, I get that I can put in my own network and have all of these benefits. But what's the process? How do I start? Who do I need in my camp to make this happen?
Good question. It kind of depends on the maturity of the environment that you have inside your company. Small utilities may not have a deep technical IT technical capability. Larger utilities are going to have people who know how to do this stuff, so who probably already are fairly familiar with how the service works. So the first thing is to figure out where the roadblocks are going to be in your process to go from an idea through to implementation and actual deployment. I will say this, NIPA has been involved with the UBBA since the very beginning. And I remember one of the first meetings we had, I think it was the first meeting we had, big conclave in, was New Orleans, I think. Maybe it was Alabama.
Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah, Alabama. And there was a lot of interest, a lot of great presentations, a lot of interest from the utilities, a lot of dialogue, but things were just beginning. We were like kicking the dirt, trying to find out if there was something substantive there. And then in St. Louis at the end of last year, we had another big meeting, and just the growth in the industry in terms of the kinds of equipment that's available from various vendors, the support you could get from third-party consultants, the knowledge base that is being built just within a couple of years in terms of understanding how this works and how to implement it. There's a lot of ways a utility can go now and find people who can help them do this. And if you're reticent to start or trying to figure out where to start, I would reach out to a consultant, a named consultant who has some experience in this, and get some direction from them based on your financial and technical position where you're at. And start there and then build out a plan. I think it's really important to go with a plan. Don't start looking at technology until you've got a plan, and figure out what the business capabilities are you need to have wireless LTE or private LTE support. When you can do that, then you can build a business case. And I've seen it happen before where people will go and start looking at a really cool technology. They get to the point where they want to do something with it, and they have to backtrack for 5 months because they never built a business case around it. And so you'd start there with the fundamentals. And it may not be as fun as playing with the technology, but it's going to get you further along the way faster. And once you can do that, then you can talk to your executives in that state, then you're going to be successful. I hope that helps.
That is very helpful, Jerry. You really hit on some key points here. And it's one of the opportunities that utilities that have joined UBA and have a chance to speak with others, and that is a business case. And there has to be a business case for this massive change. Steve, I'm going to go back to you. We're going to stay on the same topic, and as you've worked with a number of utilities out there, what are you seeing, and which, it sounds like a chicken and egg. I need the technology, but I also need the business case. Where should they start?
I think Jerry had a great point. What I try to encourage utilities to do is define what success looks like. A lot of times we have clients who want to test product but don't understand what success looks like. So I think if you have a true business plan in place, using Jerry's model, where you take a look at what do I anticipate the outcome to be, or what outcome would support my business case. If you have a business case, then you start to deploy technology, and then you have a defined key performance indicators that say, if we're able to meet these objectives, then that proves out my case. So when, as Jerry said, you go back to your senior leadership and you take this to them, you say, here's what I wanted to accomplish. And if I accomplish this with technology, here's how it impacted my business, and here were the business drivers, and here's how I defined them beforehand, and here's the outcomes. I think you have a much better conversation than just saying, hey, look how cool this technology is and what can I do with it. So it's always got to be tied back into what is the overall utility trying to accomplish, what are they trying to impact. And I think that, I've been involved with UBBA again from Birmingham too. And I think something this group's done an excellent job is the willingness to share. While it is competitive, it's not competitive. This group does a super job of sharing information, lessons learned. And then I think that, we've tried to build a total cost of ownership model that could be very valuable for these utilities to reference to as they build their own and do that. But, my takeaway here is as you build your business plan, have a key performance indicator, KPIs, or what you anticipate would be success for you, and then deploy the technology and measure against that success. It might be that you come out with different success, and that may be okay too, but at least have some success criteria in place to support your business plan.
That's great. Thanks, Steve. Jatinder, I'm going to give you a chance to chime in on this one, and then I'm going to switch the question up for Tim. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I think I actually like I said, right, from Tele, we've been like working with utilities in the private space, private cellular deployments since 2015 with 450 megahertz. So we've have experience working with customers that are doing such transitions, for many years. And then also in the U.S., what I'm seeing with the early adapters are really three things. Them mapping out the prioritized strategic communication roadmap, right, that we're talking about, with the opportunities and challenges, right? That's number one. The second thing is, they've established and started to work with trusted partners in the industry that are experts in their particular area, right? In the area, not just technology providers, but technology advisors. So, they're starting to find out who those people are that have the experience that they can leverage, right? So, and the third thing is what the guys already talked about is many of them are also part of the UBBA, and that's a great thing to be part of because we can leverage the document that we're talking about today, number one, and also we can leverage best practices from the industry, success stories, and things like Steve just talked about. Basically, all this will help them reduce the risk of failure.
That's great. Thanks, Jitender. All right, Tim, let's get a little back to a little bit of the technology side of this. You're working with a number of utilities that are looking at private wireless networks. What are the use cases? What are the key things that they're going to be doing in order to justify this network?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like Jerry's talking about earlier, a lot of these utilities have a very robust fiber network, but as their user base is starting to distribute, I mean, there's a lot of homes being put up in rural locations, and it's very costly for them to go out and try to put fiber at all these different locations. So what they're doing is they're looking at this, a very robust and solid cellular technology as a way to expand that network for them more quickly at a cost-effective approach. So as they're doing it, they're allowing that to be able to extend their networks quicker, faster, and then also when they're doing that, they're also leveraging some of that technology to help them with different technologies themselves, like monitoring some of their capacitor networks, their substations, looking at some of the solar grid stuff I mentioned earlier, keeping an eye on those type of things. So they're leveraging those type of technologies. And then, like in the case of Newport down in Tennessee, they're combining those two. They're starting off offering up, actual wireless services to the customer base, but they also have the ability to offer that to their employees. So when they're out in the field doing work, where they don't have coverage coming from one of the mobile operators that they have agreements with, now they can put their own coverage in place and make sure that their actual employees have coverage while they're out in the field, so they can communicate real time on when to shut the grid off, when to turn the grids back on, those type of things, and ensuring that they have a good, robust network to monitor and maintain their network and provide communication plans for their actual employees while they're out running their trucks and doing their repairs during outages, those type of things.
Tim, you hit on some really key points there. I know my entire time in the utility, safety was always first. Safety of our workers, safety of our customers, always first. It's a dangerous product. I mean, it's just the bottom line. So thanks for bringing that up, and that ability to be sure that you can communicate with those crews in the field, I think is really a very powerful use case. Jitender, I want to get just even a little bit more technical here. Utilities and other companies they've bought single purpose wireless solutions before, sometimes on proprietary technologies, that sort of thing. Some of us are old enough to remember things like the Betamax and other standards that didn't stick. Sell me on why would I go down the LTE path? Why is that better? I know it's a global standard, but why hook my why hook my horse to, or my wagon to that horse?
Yeah, a great question. I mean, the advantage of using cellular or wireless is high flexibility when it comes to time to expand to different geographies that we talked about earlier, right? As long as you have cellular coverage, you don't need to dig in the ground, things like that. And next, I would say cellular technology is standard technology and not proprietary, as you alluded to. So you will be able to interoperate with a broad number of devices, broad range of devices. The standards are backed by a wide industry ecosystem. The cellular standards are continuously maintained and upgraded regularly. Today there's cellular standards that are tailored specifically for IoT use cases, right? So LTE and NB-IoT, those are really catered towards IoT use cases, as I talked about before in terms of the modules and stuff that we're offering. And lastly, with cellular, you can start to reach directly each node of the grid, right? Either at substation or at the edge, allowing point-to-point connections. So those are some of the benefits that I see when you transition.
Steve, I'd like to go. Oh, Tim, did you have some?
Yeah, I was gonna say one more thing I'll add on to with Jatinder there is just the technology, LTE technology, and going on to 5G is just a wireless security interface. It's very, very proprietary. There's a lot of signaling that goes on, a lot of security stuff that was put into the standards to inherently keep people from trying to hack into the networks from a wireless perspective. And then on a private LTE side of the house, you could actually implement even additional features on there to make it even more secure to where only certain devices within your network could actually even access the network and block everything else out too. Yeah.
Well, before we get to Q&A, I've got one more question, and I'm going to direct it to Steve. He's got such a broad experience, with utilities and other companies he's worked with. Steve, in the news these days, we hear about AT&T and pretty soon Verizon shutting down their 3G networks. I remember very clearly my days in the utility. The distribution assets, the cap bank controllers, the reclosers, these sort of things, those will last 40, 50 years. And we're almost being forced migrated by the public carriers, and with private LTE you have some choices there. You can upgrade when it's time for you to upgrade. Can you talk a little bit about that the kind of the natural evolution of the standards, and then the opportunities that a private network provider has?
Well, I was thinking about that when Jatinder and Tim were talking about the advantages and benefits of LTE, 3GPP standards. So I really see private LTE as probably the best of both worlds, because you get the advantage of the fact that it's a global technology, that you have all this input from all these, different companies, different industries, different labs, different universities that are making it better and better each and every day. And on the opposite of that, unlike the commercial service providers who are evolving, on a cycle of maybe a 10-year period of changing out technology, and which disrupts utilities. Me, again, at a utility, we had transformers that had been out there older, that were older than I was, and so that the exchange of infrastructure was not on the same cycle. Now, I think at a utility that they're starting to see that refresh cycle start to become much more frequent than what it was maybe in our day, because of the technology is changing. But you hit the nail on the head, Mike, is that one of the things that I don't know whether they're business drivers or whether they're business requirements, but one of the things that's driving utilities to make a change is the desire to have command control, reliability, resiliency, and to do it in a capital environment. And when you think about what we're talking about from a PLTE perspective, it gives you command control. And I usually talk about command control from the ability to make sure your traffic gets through on time, and you have control of that traffic. You have control of the restoration of it, but you also have control of the refresh cycle. Mm-hmm. Now, there are going to be some limitations because the ecosystem is going to drive some of that refresh. So, depending upon how often the ecosystem continues to refresh their product, but still you're going to get an extended period that I think that's what being accepted right now is a 20-year cycle. So, they're able to get the advantages of LTE technology because of it being an industry-wide standard, and yet they still have that command control in how often they refresh it. So I see it as being the best of both worlds, Mike.
Yeah, it's a great answer, Steve. Okay, everybody's going to get a closing shot, but before we do that, it's time for us to turn it over to the audience. And Bobby, I'll bring you back on and see if we've got any good questions out there from the audience.
Thanks so much, guys. Sorry, I was rapidly writing down notes as all of you were chatting, because you're absolutely right. From UVBA's perspective, we have a lot going on around this same topic. Clearly, As one of our commenters, it wasn't really a question, but clearly from one of our utility members, the cost of doing nothing has so many pieces. So we could go on for days about legacy devices, about security, about maintenance windows, and all of that good fun stuff. But we had a question. Let me see if I can read it. Just give me 1 second. I want to read it and make sure I understand it as I say it. Okay. Okay. So the question is, and I'm just going to read it outright, and then we'll see if we can go through it. So two things talked about: cost and safety relative to new wireless deployments. This person is curious about critical communication solution supplier, and if this component is also being brought into the evaluation. If I can.
Bobby, we're getting a lot of feedback there, a lot of typing. I don't know if somebody needs to be muted there, but maybe you could summarize the question.
Okay, let me see if I can figure that out. So I guess it's really around safety of new wireless deployments. As
Well, that is a great question. I'm gonna let's go straight to Jerry. He's at utility. Jerry, how much is safety playing into your business case for wireless?
Quite a bit. That, again, as I mentioned, we have a lot of remote areas, rural areas that we service, and our transmission lines run through what looks like a ski slope. So, the field workers have to go out there when there's 18, 20 inches, 30 inches of snow, and they have to deal with things during a storm. So safety is a paramount. We need that connectivity. We need them to be able to do that. We've tried a number of different things. This probably wouldn't be the only solution, but it's going to be a fundamental part of the toolkit we give them when they're out in the field.
Great. Bobby, any other questions?
one is actually being typed, but I can't see it yet. Give me just a
Hey,
second.
Mike,
It
I
shows
just
me
wanted to
typing.
add.
Oh, go ahead, Tinder.
Yeah, I mean, just while Bobby looks that up, I just wanted to add that's kind of one of the advantages also of going to a private network. It can be more secure than even a public one due to the smaller amount of traffic on a private network compared to the public one. It's like a drop of water, I think we once talked about. So therefore, private side is more easier to monitor if anything goes wrong or anything from a security perspective. Just wanted to kind of add some color from that perspective also.
Yeah, and I might make one more comment there, Mike, is that, I think we've all seen the global situation we're in today, and I thought I saw where there was notifications out to the utilities to say, beware, be careful. I think cyber war is going to be one of the new precursors to any other type of war. So I think that, we all know that our critical infrastructure, as we mentioned, is utilities. And so they need to make sure that they're doing everything possible, and private environments definitely add that additional layer of security for them, and they have more control, again, command control.
I'm glad you brought that topic up, Steve. Obviously, it's top of mind for me. I didn't know when the right time to bring it up would be, but my goodness, the world is a scary place right now. Yeah. Tim, do you want to chime in on that same topic about safety or cybersecurity?
Yeah, again, back on the safety stuff, it's like when these guys are out in the field, I actually have, a number of friends that work in the utility space, and one of their biggest risks is when they get out there is being able to communicate back with the command center and making sure that, when that power grid's coming down, when it's coming back on, and how they manage all of those communications is very critical for them. And one of the things too, like on the actual LTE side, that it's even though it can be hacked and taken down, it's a much harder, complicated a way to try to go in and try to hack a wireless network from the LTE side of the house. So for just the security standpoint from that side, it really makes it a very robust wireless network for the operators to go out there and leverage that for a way to extend their network safely.
Hey, Mike, I'd like to add one more thing.
Yes.
Not only is safety important in terms of a field worker being dispatched, it's also important in terms of not having to dispatch a field worker because you've got sensors out in the remote areas and you can tell when something is there and you can do preventive maintenance on wire sag and, towers that are beginning to lean and things. You don't have to wait for the critical storm to hit to have a problem.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I think we're all wise enough here. We're not trying to paint that a private network is never going to go down. The difference is that the utility can prioritize which portions of that network come up, and they don't have to wait in line for everyone else. So back to Bobby. Bobby, do we have any other questions?
Yeah, let me just read this one out. Okay, so we're obviously talking a lot about the cost of doing nothing, about benefits of action. The question is, aren't we at a point where much more is going to be asked of the grid itself in the next 1 to 2 years? Integration of distributed energy, mitigation of wildfires, advanced cybersecurity, as we were discussing, enhanced resiliency, and all requiring the collection, movement, and analysis of the data. Isn't or is there an undeniable immediate need for broadband? That's the
Well,
question.
I'm going to go back to Jerry. He's operating or part of the group that's operating a very large network there in New York. So, Jerry, why don't you take it first?
Yeah, sure. Within the last 2 years, we've deployed 85,000 sensors out within our environment, and we're looking at more. And so, yeah, it's the confluence of a number. Everything is being digitalized. I hate that word, but it seems to be out there these days. And we have the confluence of a number of significant business initiatives that are having that overlap. And it all comes down to how do I best get information? So where's the best place to put that information? I want to have some of it out in the field close to where the workers are so that, they can use an iPad and immediately upload what they're seeing in terms of work order remediation and notes right from the field, as opposed to having to travel 20, 30, 50 miles back to a relay point where they can, do it via thumb drive. How do I make things more convenient for them? It's just, there are a number of issues that are coming together simultaneously where everything is being, brought into a digital format, but it's going to be very, very distributed. So what's the best way to get the information I need to the point where I'm at from where it exists? And this network provides a huge amount of flexibility that way.
Yeah,
I'll throw it open to the other panel. Any comments around that?
yeah. I was gonna say one of the things that we'd see, Mike, too, is like you've seen a lot of stuff in the news about fires and stuff in California, and now they're implementing these active monitoring systems to know when a wire goes down. And with the active network, if you're using a third party network, a mobile network or whatever, and that if there happens to be some sort of event in the area where the capacity is consumed for whatever reasons, with owning your own wireless network, you're able to go ahead and really proactively manage and act upon situations in those type of conditions. If they can shut the power off to a line that they know that has broken and do it within a matter of time that keeps it from creating a fire, that right there is very, very critical for them on how to manage that and try to keep from having those very large forest fires or even other events that happen in metropolitan areas where you have a 100,000-volt line drop across the street, and it's right near the schools. You want to be able to monitor those and shut them down as quickly as possible. So,
absolutely. Bobby, do we have any more questions from the audience?
We do not at the
Okay.
moment. But one question, and this is, I'm sorry, I'm going to blindside you guys, but I know you all have firsthand demonstratable knowledge. And some of the utilities, when we talk about the cost of doing nothing, sometimes utilities say, let me see that. What can I see? What can you show me that would compel me to build this business strategy? Because it truly is a top level business strategy with bottom level challenges. Um, So, and I know at UBBA we talk about demos, we talk about from the Plug Fest, we come about this from different directions, but I know you guys and your organizations all have the ability, either through an innovation center or a lab. Talk a little bit about how utilities can talk through with the community some of this not doing nothing for a
Sure.
double negative.
Let me jump in there, Mike. I'd love to talk a little bit about what
Good.
Ericsson's doing in that vein. Is that as I mentioned earlier, that utilities are risk averse and they want to be a close second and not a leading first. And so I'm excited about the fact that Ericsson's made a significant commitment to the utility industry, not only building a team of people together to support them, but they've invested in what they call a utilities innovation center. And so in our facility in Texas, we've worked with some of the ecosystem you see here on the screen with us, and we've worked with other ecosystem partners that you come in and see at our lab the ability to be able to communicate to those devices in real time and put real applications across them. So, for those who want to see it work and understand why they want to see it work, that's something that we're able to do in our center, and hopefully I can extend an invitation to anybody who might want to come down, spend some time with us, whether you be an ecosystem partner, whether you be a utility that wants to see it work. But Ericsson has that ability at our Plano facility to do that. And I think, Bobby, that was a great question, and allow us to, each of us to talk about how we understand that you need to be able to see it, touch it, feel it. And so yeah, I'm excited about what Ericsson's doing, excited to be with Ericsson and seeing this through with the utility industry.
Great. Well, hey, we're coming up to the top of the hour. I promised everybody a parting shot. Steve, that was fantastic.
Yes.
It almost sounded like a parting shot. Definitely
Was.
an open invitation to come down and see what you guys have got. Anything to add to that, or
No, that was my parting shot. Is that it's a huge investment by Ericsson. They're committed to the industry, and come down and see us.
Great. Jatinder, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I hope everyone listening on this call found today's discussion meaningful, and I guess understand the importance to be partner with a quality partner that you can trust as we're protecting our critical infrastructure, right? So I guess we at Tele, we're happy to be in the front of this new business from utilities, bringing them together, and the ecosystem partners that are here on the panel with me to support their evolution to digital transformation with our with various products and solutions. So we're excited to be as part of this journey, and we look forward to working with more people as we go in more further into 2022.
Great. Tim, how about you?
Yeah, I think it was touched on earlier. This UBBA ecosystem is really a great vehicle for the utilities to learn something fast. Alpha Wireless, we do antennas not only from the macro side, we also do them on the endpoint type of devices too. We learn what our customers need. We roll up our sleeves and we find those solutions. When we're working with our customers, since I have like 25 years of background in the telecom industry, I share as much of my knowledge as I can with my partnership with my customers, just to make sure that it's a win-win. So like if we need to take and pull in special expertise within Ericsson for something, I have a lot of those type of relationships in place. We'll pull those people in, we'll get things solved to make sure that everyone is successful in deploying a network that they can manage, maintain, and actually roll out in a very timely and cost-effective manner. So we really do like to partner with our actual clients, because that's at the end of the day, that's what makes us all successful, and that's why we really pour a lot into making sure our solutions meet the needs of our customers.
That's great. Well, Jerry, we started with utility. We're going to close with the utility, so you get the last shot.
Oh, great. Well, I want to thank UVBA and you, Mike, for coordinating this and giving me the opportunity. It's been a great pleasure. I got two things. One, I meant to talk about before. I'm so worried about focused on the amount of data we're collecting. I forgot to bring up that we're doing a lot of drones. We actually got a license to fly beyond line of sight with a drone right now. And so they collect a lot of data, and having a network like a private LTE to connect them is a huge part of the justification we have for how we're going to manage those. And then going back to some of the other statements that were made, I think I remember a comment that I read from a telecom engineer at AT&T who designed central offices years ago. And he said his design principle was extensibility in the face of future uncertainty. And I look at how what I've seen happening in this space, the private LTE, the 5G environment stuff. That's exactly what it is. So investments you make in equipment now are going to be migratable and extensible, upgradable for some period, for a long period of time. You'll get a very good use out of it, and the standard is going to be, as was mentioned, continued to be evolved, but it's not going to circumvent the previous version of it. It's going to carry along, and as a private LTE, you can choose what you implement when and where and how, and you'll know it continue to be supported for a long time. So I think it's not that it's a safe bet. There's always risk in any kind of investment, but this is one where I think the manufacturers have joined together on a global basis and have really come and are building something that's very worthwhile.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists today. Bobby, I'm going to turn it back to you to close us out.
Great, Mike. Well, I want to also thank you all from UBBA and all of our membership. Thanks to Anterix for sponsoring this webinar and for all the great things that you're building through the ecosystem and particularly through the Utility Broadband Alliance. I encourage everyone to reach out to these great technology and utility thought leaders if you have any additional questions. And thank you for your time here today, fellas. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.